Hi, it's Mark Wilkinson, and thank you for joining us for the Modern Utility CX series. Joining me today is Rory Keane from Ibex Global. He's the director of enterprise business development and an expert in the CX area. And today we're going to be talking about customer centricity, an expansion of some of the conversations we've had in the past. There's a great study that we've been talking about internally from Capgemini a couple of years ago that shows a gap between what customers feel or recognize and the confidence that business leaders have in their customer centricity. And it really begs the question, can you really be customer centric if your customers don't know it? So we thought we would take some time today and explore this issue. We'll talk a little bit about the gap in customer centricity between the leaders of businesses and their customers. We'll talk about what it means to really bring the customer to the center of the business and challenge some of the historical thinking and why these gaps exist and how to fix them. And then, as always, we'll bring a few ideas to the table for our utility partners about what it really means to be able to bring customer centricity to the center of a utility business and the unique characteristics of those challenges. So Rory, we've talked about this quite a lot, and but to refresh for everybody, Capgemini in 2017, 2018 did a survey of more than 3,000 people to talk about the disconnected customer because they started to perceive a difference between the businesses and industries that said, oh yeah, we're very customer centric, and the customer's response. And so you can see here rather starkly that depending on the industry you're in, there's a big challenge. So for example, in consumer products, 81% of companies, leaders in companies, reported that they were either moderately or very customer centric. But by contrast, when the survey checked with those customers, only 14% of the customers recognized it, which begs the question, you know, if your customers don't think you're customer centric, can you really be putting them at the center of the business? And I thought this was just a staggering gap in terms of what earnest, hardworking, thoughtful executives and leaders in the business are trying to do to bring the customer more to the center of their business decisions, and why there is such a gap in customers actually recognizing those efforts. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple different factors in why we see this gap. And I mean, it's clear that customer experience since 2015 has been on the top of every executive's list and becoming better at it. And there's been no shortage of money spent on it, whether it's through new technology, consulting, different surveys and research. But, you know, from my point of view or perspective, it feels like that the way people are, or the way organizations are asking their customers questions and benchmarking themselves as being customer centric is based on legacy processes, and they're trying to close the gap very fast using a legacy approach. And with the rise of digital, and you can see in the retail banking and internet-based services, this is a spot where Amazon, Apple, and fast forward thinking of online payments have really adapted and set the standard for how brands need to interact with customers.
Yeah, you're right. The nature of internet-based companies like an Amazon and Apple for the majority of services being e-commerce, or just the high bar that those businesses set, because they call themselves customer obsessed businesses, where there's a chattiness in that kind of customer engagement. There's in an internet-based business, especially with the kind of tracking and technology that's available, those industries, those businesses have so much data flowing back and forth that they have really up-to-date real-time telemetry on customer activities, why they got to the site, how they got to the site, what they looked at on the site, where they're how much time they're spending, whether they're with pixels and with cookies, all of the various connection points, and they've got an opportunity to remarket. And you talk about segmentation in that space, and it's really, they've got so much data, it's a segment of one, it's me. And at the far right side of that graph, those companies that have the most data and spend the most time figuring that stuff out really have an advantage in terms of customers perceiving a highly personalized customer-centric experience. And your point about retail banking is exactly right. I mean, I think about as little as 5 years ago being amazed that I could take a picture of a check on my phone and deposit it into my bank account, And I'm still wondering why I can't do that everywhere.
I don't know the
As good
last time
as
I've been in a
e-commerce
bank.
gets. Yeah, when was like, ATMs used to be cutting edge technology. I don't even know where there's a bank of my brand anymore because I can do it all on my phone. And so those companies that have really embraced technology and geeked out on, some of those service enhancements have been able to show that they're doing things that the customers perceive as important, right? They clearly being able to do all my banking on my phone is something that customers also, other customers like me think is valuable because the banks keep investing in it versus some of that other side where I think you're right. Though it seems like the legacy metrics, the legacy either technologies or measures or legacy metrics for measuring what the customer thinks is important have been letting these industries down because I got to believe, like you said, I have to believe that there's no executive in the country that doesn't want to do better to connect with their customer. There's just no industry that says, yeah, we don't care. So everybody's got to have, earnest effort. It's just that, and they're making decisions based on data. The utility industry is incredibly data centric in that respect. They're always taking a look at all the available data to make decisions. It seems like that those factors are letting them down. That those legacy metrics no longer meet the need. Um, talk to me about what the old world and the new world looks like from that perspective.
Oh, and I think that's a great way to put it. The legacy measures, as we've been speaking to, it's really about almost an audit-like process and asking questions to customers that would be table stakes. Was your problem solved on the first call? Were you able to speak to an agent in a timely manner? Those in our current day are from an Amazon. It's standard process. I fill out a request to speak to someone and I get a call within a minute or 2 minutes, right? So, that along with waiting for an Uber outside your house or apartment, wherever you are, and it shows up in the snap of a finger, that has become everyone's expectation moving forward, whether you're Uber or the dentist or a utility. And so at a time where the customer is evolving rapidly, it begs the question, what technology can you rely on to not only keep pace with that customer, but to get ahead of them? And then that's where we start shifting from, annual surveys and getting snapshots of customer feedback from the customer journey and start being able to have that conversational CX that you mentioned earlier. And you can start having surveys or areas for feedback intertwined throughout the whole customer journey so that you're having that conversation with them at all touch points throughout the journey without being overwhelming. And then you start incorporating really amazing technology that's available, like text analytics and sentiment scoring, and uncovering nuggets of gold in that feedback, and mining for insights that are actually going to lead to intelligent interactions and predictive interactions with your customers. And so now customers aren't waiting to solve a problem or waiting to speak to someone. You're having real-time issue engagement and resolution, and really changing how the brand perceives your customer experience. And that's when you start to see the customer centricity become more apparent.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there because I remember as a client retention officer, we would do an NPS style survey a couple of times a year, and everybody fixed on those numbers, but they didn't really tell us what to fix. If you had a great score, excellent. If you had a lousy score, it became the theme for the next couple of quarters. But it was very hard to translate, some of those more simple structures into data to make decisions on where to put your resources. And even with verbatims, a business can quickly get overwhelmed. If I think of a typical utility with a couple million households, they're billion-dollar businesses in many cases. They can be awash in customer feedback, and unless you have technology and analytics, you can get swamped by the data, and I used to publish a book of verbatims a couple of times a year, and there'd be 400 or 500 different individual comments, and an executive would take a look at one that resonated for them, and that would be what they focus on for the next quarter. Changing that dynamic to really do text analytics and create data science around the verbatim comments, understand the sentiment, around what customers think is the most important, seems to be able to tip the scales, right? Instead of saying whether a customer is satisfied with a particular process or outcome, the sentiment scoring, the text analytics, a lot of the new discovery can say, well, how important is it to them? because, there may be four or five things that customers are, consider satisfactory or unsatisfactory. Which one or two does a business need to invest in? That's missing from a lot of those legacy metrics, do you think?
Absolutely. And I think, it opens up the door up to understand your customers in different geographies too. A lot of companies are, struggling to find comparisons between the Mark Wilkinsons of Georgia and, the Mark Wilkinsons in a different service area. I mean, you could be having issues that someone else in Florida might not be having, right? So understanding your customers wherever they are at whatever point in their journey is critical, because once you have that information, you can intelligently analyze it and dashboard it. Then you start to see what matters to customers in certain geos, and it brings a whole new level of strategic thinking. Rather than just being reactive, you can start to understand your customers and be proactive in your processes and planning.
And it doesn't take a lot, it doesn't mean that a business has to give up on any of their legacy metrics, because there's a lot of good process around that. It really can begin even as simply with adding some different forms of survey points, some new milestones in the customer journey. So, there's a traditional post-billing escalation survey. Well, maybe ask a couple of different questions, ask a sentiment question. I think one of the really powerful elements that we've seen in the CX world, with some of our engagements, is when we can do an informal survey after an interaction and monitor the results. So if a customer uses a survey as an informal escalation process, they say, "Hey, this experience was a 2 on a 5-star scale. Here's why." Um, you know, Customers expect a response. And so if we're monitoring that and we can call that customer back or reach out to that customer and find, even the attempt at solving the problem shows we're listening to them. Even if we can't necessarily solve the problem in one call, that customer who's responded to a survey knows that the business puts them, cares enough, is informed enough, and is watching to re-engage with that consumer. So I think, a lot of this new technology doesn't take great leaps to develop some of these new insights and add to the data that can help you make better decisions.
And
And there does seem to be real benefit, right? I mean, customer experience is becoming a differentiator in the competitive marketplaces, right?
absolutely. And I was just going to say customers are willing to pay for a better experience, and, perfect segue. But I mean, I think the one thing that I've definitely noticed is with utilities, when it comes to customers, they don't always have a choice for, with what utility they get to sign up with. So I guess my question to you, Mark, is where do utilities improve their experiences for customers?
Yeah, I think that's always the question, right? When a customer doesn't have choice of a competitor, they're sort of captive. What does it mean when a customer is either more loyal or has higher retention? Those same metrics don't apply. But utilities do have a lot of programs that that lean towards more engaged customers, right? So a lot of utilities are starting to deliver marketplaces to sell different products and services. So you'll see utilities with an e-commerce portal where you can get a repair or protection plan, or maybe a smart thermostat or some LED bulbs. And it's a source of revenue, but it's also a source of customer engagement. And customers who are, notice the value in that are more likely to play. But it isn't even a revenue metric. In many cases, customers are willing to just get more engaged with brands that they feel better connected to, that deliver a higher quality experience. And we're talking about digital experiences for the most part. It's, being able to do more customer self-service, and an app, have more people enrolled in an app and doing things with a mobile app to check their bill, or maybe check the energy efficiency monitoring that goes on. And I think there's another stat that Capgemini's talked about, that there's an overwhelming percentage of customers that know that they could save money with an energy efficiency program, and they're not taking steps to do anything about it. Well, I guarantee that customers that feel their utility is, more customer centric and has thought about what's important to them, those are customers that have an easy path to energy efficiency information, and they've got choices to activate those programs, and they receive the benefit of them. Things like demand response or time of use payments, and other programs like that, maybe an EV charger in their house that goes on the bill. Those are all programs that are going to appeal to customers who are more engaged with the utility, and utilities that are delivering a better experience, I think, are going to find a higher percentage of those customers. So it doesn't always translate into direct revenue, but utilities overwhelmingly with high CSAT are getting much better return on equity. They see much better digital engagement. They see much better customer participation in those types of programs. So I think that's one of the real differentiating factors there. And I think the trick, as you've described perfectly, is getting to know the customers and what's important to them, is that transition from the old legacy metrics to really understanding where to focus your resources as a utility or any of these industries, to really understand where to focus on improving customer centricity that customers will also recognize.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head with that. And the time of use, the options to be more self-serve, I can speak from my own experience. It definitely creates more satisfaction. It definitely moves the needle, knowing that you're put at the center of the decision-making process.
Yeah, and customers just want to know that their brands care. But boy, it's tough for any brand to understand what customers are focused on. And when you get to that highly personalized experience, you really need to be able to get new data and better data and analyze that data more efficiently. So, um, well, as always, we appreciate the time today. And Rory, thanks for joining me for this discussion. If anybody has any questions for Rory about topics associated with a modern utility customer experience or any CX issue, please reach out. It's rory.keen@ibex.co. And you can also find us at www.ibex.co/utilities. And please join us next time when we'll meet again to talk about real-time telemetry for the modern utility customer experience. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mark.